The first time Ethan Mercer met her, she was late, 12 minutes to be exact, and he hated lateness almost as much as he hated needing help. He stood in his corner office, watching the Manhattan skyline as the clouds hovered low like they were debating rain. The office smelled faintly of lemon oil from the cleaning crew and fresh printer ink. Everything in his world was ordered, measured, deliberate. And then came the soft knock. He didn't turn. Yes. The door opened with a quiet hiss, then silence. He waited. When the person didn't speak, he pivoted. She was standing just inside the doorway, not nervous exactly, but aware, like someone who knew the rules of a room but never fully belonged to it. "I'm sorry for being late," she said, brushing a damp curl from her cheek. "There was an accident on the F train. I tried to call ahead." He noted the way she didn't offer excuses, just stated the facts. "You're here now," he said, motioning to the chair across from his desk. "Let's get started." She sat spine straight, hands calm in her lap. Her resume sat on his desk, though he'd already read it twice. Grace Carter, 32. Former nanny turned child behavioral consultant, master in early childhood development, referred by a friend of his COO's wife. A temporary solution, just for the summer. "I don't want to live in," he began. "You won't need one," she said. "I travel a lot. Meetings, acquisitions, overnight flights. I'm flexible. My son is," he paused, "particular." "I read that in your brief," she said, "and I like particular." He narrowed his eyes. Most people say that until they meet him. "Then let's meet him." Ethan studied her. She didn't flinch, didn't fidget. She wore a simple navy dress, flat shoes, no jewelry, no makeup save for the faintest smudge of lip balm. She looked like she could disappear into a crowd or hold a crying child through a tantrum in a department store. Not that he went to department stores anymore. He exhaled. "Fine, he gets out of school at 3. Our driver will pick you both up and bring him home. You'll shadow his current nanny for the rest of the week, then she leaves. And then you're on your own." By the time Grace met Leo, she had already seen the cracks in the Mercer fortress. The driver, Anthony, was kind and chatty, and within 2 blocks, he'd told her the names of every Mercer employee who had quit in the past 6 months. "Leo's a sweet kid," he said, glancing in the rearview, "but he's got a quiet sadness, like he's waiting for something he doesn't think he'll get." Grace didn't answer. She just watched the streets blur by and took notes in her mind about Leo, about the man who'd built walls so high no one even knocked anymore. Leo emerged from the school doors with his shoulders hunched and his hands stuffed deep in his coat pockets. 8 years old, dark-haired like his father but slighter with a quieter presence. His eyes scanned the street with the wariness of someone older. She got out and opened the car door before Anthony could. "Hi, Leo," she said. "I'm Grace." He looked at her but didn't respond. She didn't push. Inside the car, she sat in the back with him. They rode in silence for 2 blocks before he spoke. "Are you the new one?" "Yes." "Will you leave too?" "I don't plan on it," she said. He looked out the window again, unmoved. "They all say that." She didn't respond, she didn't promise, but she stayed sitting close. The penthouse was clean to the point of sterile. Expansive, cold, modern. The nanny, Vanessa, greeted them at the door and began a dry rundown of routines, dietary preferences, allergies, screen time rules. Grace listened and watched Leo melt into the couch, disappearing into his silence. That evening when Ethan returned from work, Grace was still there. Leo was reading on the floor. Grace sat beside him with a sketchpad, drawing quiet loops in the corner of the page. Ethan paused in the entry. He didn't expect to see her still in the apartment. He especially didn't expect the stillness. "How was it?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. Leo shrugged. "Okay." That was more than he'd said to Vanessa in a week. Grace stood. "I'll be back tomorrow." Ethan nodded, then paused. "You didn't have to stay that long." "I did." She didn't elaborate, just smiled slightly and left. The first few weeks unfolded, with the cautious rhythm of people learning each other. Grace arrived early. She left late. She asked Leo if he wanted toast or waffles and never minded when he said nothing and pointed instead. She learned that he liked to sit under tables when he was overwhelmed and that he hummed faintly when he was thinking hard. She didn't fill the silences, she made space for them. One morning, as Ethan buttoned his cufflinks and prepared for a meeting with investors, he passed the kitchen and froze. Grace was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, her phone playing a faint jazz tune. Leo was beside her, sketching a spaceship with neon markers. They were both quiet, but something in the air felt easy, undemanding. He stood there longer than he meant to. She looked up. "Good morning," she said, voice low, like they were in a chapel. He nodded. He didn't understand how she made the apartment feel smaller and bigger at the same time, like it had rooms he hadn't known existed. By mid-June, the walls had shifted. Leo smiled more. He laughed at movies again. He asked for extra toast. And one evening, after Grace had gone home, he sat beside his father on the balcony and asked what time she'd be back in the morning. Ethan blinked. 8. Leo nodded. Good. And that was all. But Ethan noticed the way the boy slept better, how he hummed again when brushing his teeth, how the silence of the apartment had changed from suffocating to bearable. He told himself it was the structure, kids needed it, Grace was good at structure. That night he dreamed of the quiet warmth of her presence and woke up irritated. He didn't need softness. He needed order. In July, Leo asked if Grace could come to his end-of-year class picnic in Central Park. She glanced at Ethan before answering. "Only if your dad says yes." Leo looked up. "Please." Ethan hesitated. He didn't do school picnics. But Grace, standing there in jeans and a loose gray t-shirt, nodded as if it was already settled. At the park, he watched her navigate conversations with other parents like she belonged. She knelt to tie Leo's shoe when he tripped. She carried snacks in a tote that smelled faintly of peppermint. When it started raining lightly, she pulled a folded poncho from her bag and draped it over Leo's head. He shrieked with laughter and ran into the grass. Ethan stood under the shelter with her. "You're very prepared," he said. "I've worked with kids a long time. You make it look easy." "It's not," she said, her eyes meeting his, "but neither is being a single parent." He looked away. They stood together in silence, close but not touching. The rain fell soft and steady. She didn't ask anything more. And that night, for the first time in years, he missed someone after they left. He didn't like that either. By late summer, she knew the rhythm of their lives. The way Ethan took his coffee black but always left a quarter of it untouched. How he worked late on Thursdays but was always home by dinner on Saturdays. And he knew her rhythms too. That she took her shoes off the second she walked into the apartment. That she always carried a notebook she never let anyone read. That she hummed when she was focused and stared into space when she was sad. They didn't talk about it, whatever was building between them. But it was there in the way he lingered before leaving for work, the way she didn't rush out the door anymore, the way Leo held her hand without thinking. In the quiet moments, Ethan sometimes forgot she wasn't staying. And Grace, despite everything she'd told herself, started to wish she could. Grace noticed the change not in a grand gesture, but in the smallest of things. One morning in early August, there was a mug waiting for her beside the coffee machine. Not just any mug, one with a faded floral print and a slight chip in the rim. Ethan didn't say anything about it when he passed her in the kitchen, still in his running clothes, hair damp from the shower. But it was there again the next morning. And the one after. She never asked where it came from. He never mentioned it. It was the kind of intimacy that grew in the in-between, between packed lunches and school drop-offs, between forgotten meetings and bedtime stories. Grace never reached for more than she was given, but somehow she kept being offered more. Even Leo noticed. "You talk different when she's around," he said one afternoon, sprawled on the living room rug building a Lego city. Ethan looked up from his tablet. "Different how?" "You don't sound tired." Ethan didn't answer, just stared at the half-built tower and thought of how the apartment felt different when Grace was in it. Not quieter, just softer. One Friday evening, Grace stayed late after dinner to help with a school project involving popsicle sticks, glue, and an unreasonable amount of glitter. Leo was animated, flinging ideas at the speed of light. Grace matched his energy, laughing and sketching blueprints like it was a real architectural marvel. Ethan stood leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes soft. "You could have been an engineer," he said when Leo had run off to get more markers. Grace looked up, a smear of glitter across her cheek. "I actually wanted to be a children's book illustrator." "Why didn't you?" She shrugged. Life, bills, things that didn't wait for dreams to pay off. He studied her. "That's a shame." She smiled without humor. "It's all right, I get to build things in other ways." Later, when she washed her hands at the sink, he was still there, leaning against the counter now, watching her like he was trying to learn her instead of just see her. "You're good with him," he said quietly. "I know. And you're good here." She turned off the tap. "This isn't permanent." He nodded, but something in his jaw tensed. "Still." She dried her hands. "You keep saying that like you're trying to convince yourself." He didn't reply. She didn't wait for one. By mid-August, the apartment no longer felt like something she entered. It felt like something she returned to. On Wednesday nights, they made pasta together. Not fancy, not structured, just Leo picking out weird shapes and Grace always managing to make it edible. Ethan stayed late those nights, sometimes helping, sometimes just sitting at the counter with a glass of wine, letting himself be pulled into the light they created. One of those evenings, Leo fell asleep on the couch, arms wrapped around a book he wouldn't finish until morning. Grace went to lift him, but Ethan was already there, cradling his son in arms that had once only known how to hold numbers and deals. Grace stood beside him as he carried Leo to his room. "You're good with him," she whispered. He looked at her over his shoulder. "I'm trying." She followed him down the hall. "That's the part that matters." After the boy was tucked in, Ethan lingered in the doorway, looking into the room like he wasn't ready to let go of the moment just yet. Grace waited, let the silence stretch. He turned to her slowly. "I never thought I'd get used to doing this alone." "You're not alone tonight." They stood there for a breath too long. Then he nodded, stepped away, and went to his office. She left without saying goodbye. Toward the end of summer, Grace received a call from a family in Connecticut, old clients, a longer-term position, higher pay, more stability. She didn't say yes. She also didn't say no. Instead, she walked to the waterfront after work, sat on a bench with a cheap deli sandwich, and stared at the river while a storm rolled in. Her fingers played with the edge of her phone, the screen still showing the voicemail she hadn't listened to all the way through. It was easier to be temporary when nothing pulled at you. But Leo had started drawing two adults in every picture. And Ethan, he had started waiting for her. The invitation came in late August, a parent-teacher orientation for the new school year. Leo would be starting 3rd grade. Ethan had never gone to one. "Do I need to be there?" he asked, clearly hoping the answer was no. Grace tilted her head. "Yes." He looked at her like she'd betrayed him. "Can you come?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I'm not his parent." He sat back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I hate things like this." "Then it's a good thing Leo needs you to show up anyway." She didn't smile when she said it, didn't sugarcoat it. He went. Later that night, he called her for the first time outside of anything strictly schedule-related. "He did great," Ethan said. "Held my hand most of the time, but let go when we got inside." Grace closed her eyes. "That's progress." "Yeah." A pause. "You were right. I often am." He huffed a soft laugh. Then quieter. "I didn't expect this. This to feel like more than a job for you." Her voice dropped. "It's not just a job for me." Another silence, this one heavier. "Me either," he said. She waited for him to hang up first. He didn't. So they just stayed on the line, breathing into the quiet, until Leo came into the room and asked what a spreadsheet was, and Ethan laughed like it was the best question he'd heard all week. In early September, Ethan invited her to dinner. Not with Leo, not with a reason, just dinner. She stared at the message longer than she should have before replying, "Okay." When he opened the restaurant door for her, he looked out of place without a tie. She looked out of place not carrying a bag full of backup snacks and Band-Aids. They sat by the window. The city felt too big for what passed between them in small glances. "I almost didn't ask," he said, halfway through a bottle of wine. "Why not?" "Because I thought maybe us, only worked in the confines of a schedule." "It doesn't," she said. "Schedules break, people stay." He didn't touch her hand, but he didn't pull away when she leaned in slightly. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "You're already doing it." He looked down, then up. "You're not going to stay, are you?" "I don't know yet." "Then give me time to change your mind." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. It was already happening. But change didn't come without resistance. The next morning, Ethan returned from a rare morning meeting to find Grace sitting in the kitchen, arms crossed, lips pressed thin. Leo had been sent home from school after punching another student. Grace didn't defend him. "He's angry," she said. "He's confused about where he stands. I told you this would come." Ethan paced the living room. "I don't understand. Things have been better." "Yes," she said, "but better doesn't mean resolved." He turned to her. "What am I supposed to do?" "Talk to him." "I do. Not about what matters." His jaw clenched. "I'm trying." She stepped closer. "Then try harder." It wasn't a fight, it was a plea. That night Ethan sat beside Leo's bed longer than usual, asked questions he'd never dared to before, and for the first time Leo answered. Grace waited just outside the door listening. Not because she was nosy. Because she cared. And because some part of her wanted to believe this thing, this fragile, blooming, impossible thing, could last even without promises. The air shifted when school began in earnest. Not just the weather, though summer had clearly folded itself away, but something subtler. A tension beneath the ordinary. Leo adjusted to his new routine with the wary caution of a boy who'd grown used to changes being temporary. His shoes sat neatly by the door each morning, his backpack zipped and ready before breakfast. But there was a watchfulness to him now, like he was waiting for something good to be taken away. Grace saw it before Ethan did. On the third Monday of September, Leo hesitated in the hallway, half in, half out of the apartment, his fingers curled around the doorframe. "Is this when she leaves?" he asked, voice small. Ethan froze mid-sip of coffee. Grace, standing just out of view, held her breath. "Why would you think that?" Ethan asked carefully. Leo shrugged, not answering. Ethan crouched down, tugging his son's sleeve gently. "She's still here, Leo. She's not going anywhere right now." "Not right now isn't always," Leo mumbled. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came. Grace stepped in then. "Hey," she said softly, crouching beside them. "I'm here today, I'll be here after school, that's the truth I can give you." Leo nodded once, eyes on the floor. It was enough for now. That night Ethan didn't work late. He came home early, loosened his tie, and asked Leo what he'd learned that day. Grace watched from the kitchen, her hand still on the kettle, as father and son sat on the couch, shoulders barely touching. There was an effort to Ethan now, conscious and deliberate, but it wasn't forced. He wanted to understand his boy. And Grace, despite her best efforts to stay practical, found herself softening toward both of them in ways she hadn't prepared for. It happened on a Thursday. An old friend of Ethan's, a business partner from his years in London, was in town. There was a dinner, a long table, a rooftop view of the skyline. Ethan brought Grace, not as Leo's caregiver, not as an employee, just as someone he wanted beside him. She wore a deep green dress and a quiet confidence. He wore the same suit he always did, but she noticed he smiled more easily when she was near. They didn't touch, not in any visible way, but everyone at the table felt the closeness, like the air bent slightly around them. After the meal, they lingered at the railing, watching the lights blur across the Hudson. "You looked like someone else tonight," she said. "Someone better or someone lost." She smiled, "Someone lighter." He glanced sideways at her. "You do that to me." She didn't speak. He continued, "When you first arrived, I thought you were a placeholder." "I know," she said, not unkindly. "I didn't think there was room for anything real anymore. There always is, but sometimes people forget." "I did forget. Until—" He didn't answer, he just turned to face her fully. She thought he might kiss her then. But instead he whispered, "Don't go yet." And she didn't. By October, the apartment had shifted again. There were new routines now, ones Ethan hadn't built but found himself folding into naturally. Saturday mornings turned into slow breakfasts and walks to the bookstore. Leo always picked something too advanced, and Grace always managed to make it a game they could solve together. One evening when Leo was at a sleepover, Grace stayed for dinner, just her and Ethan. He cooked. Sort of. She watched him burn one corner of a chicken breast and nearly forget the rice. But he was trying, and when he turned to her, flour on his wrist, cheeks flushed with frustration, she laughed. "Do you ever ask for help?" she teased. "Not until I'm past the point of no return." "That sounds familiar," she said. Their eyes met. He looked away first. But later, as they sat on the couch sharing takeout from the Thai place down the block, he said, "I don't want to pretend this is temporary anymore." She froze with her chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "I mean," he added quickly, "if it is for you, if that's what you want, I'll respect that. But I need you to know I'm not waiting for you to leave." She set the container down gently. "I've never been good at staying," she said. "I've never been good at asking anyone to." A beat passed. "Are you asking me now?" she whispered. He nodded. She didn't answer that night, but she stayed, and that said enough. Fall settled in. Leaves rustled down Broadway, and Leo began to ask if they could carve pumpkins or decorate the apartment for Halloween. Ethan, who had never once considered such things, said yes before he could talk himself out of it. They made a mess with the decorations, glitter everywhere, glue in Leo's hair. Grace trying to manage the chaos while also laughing harder than she had in months. One night after Leo had gone to bed and Grace was gathering the last of the art supplies, Ethan reached for her hand. Not on impulse, not as a question. Just a quiet, steady gesture. She looked down at their hands. Then up. "I can't promise forever," she said. "I'm not asking for a promise." "Then what are you asking for?" "Stay while it's good," he said. "Stay while it's real." She didn't let go. But not all days were soft. Leo's mother called. Out of nowhere, after 2 years of silence. She wanted to see him, one visit, supervised. Ethan didn't yell, he didn't panic. He just sat in his office, staring at the wall for nearly an hour. Grace sat across from him, quiet. "Do I let her back in?" he finally asked. "That's not a decision you make for yourself," she said. "It's one you make for Leo." "I don't trust her." "I wouldn't either. But I don't want him to grow up wondering if I kept her away out of spite." Grace leaned forward, "Then let him meet her, on your terms, and let him know you're right there with him." He looked at her, eyes weary. "You'll stay too." She nodded. "If you want me." "I do." So she did. The meeting happened in a small cafe. Grace stayed just outside, sitting at a corner table with a view through the window. Ethan sat beside Leo inside, never letting go of his hand. His ex looked older, beautiful still in that cool, unreachably elegant way. But there was a brittleness in her that hadn't been there before. She hugged Leo too tightly at first and the boy flinched. Grace watched as Ethan gently redirected, as he made space, as he stood back and let Leo ask his own questions. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. Leo came out quieter than usual, didn't cry, didn't speak for most of the drive home. But that night, as Grace tucked him into bed, he whispered, "I'm glad she came." Then, "But I'm glad you stayed." She kissed the top of his head, and something inside her shifted. Not into certainty, but into choice. Later that week, Ethan brought her a small envelope. Inside was a key. "I want you to have this," he said. She looked up sharply. "I'm not asking you to move in," he said quickly. "Not unless you want that. I want you to know the door's yours too, that it's not something you have to be invited through every time." She held the key in her palm like it might disappear. "You're not the man I met in May," she said. "I hope not. You were so certain back then, about everything. I was surviving, I thought that was enough. And now I want something that doesn't need rules to feel real." Grace stared at the key, then slowly she slid it into her coat pocket. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. She stayed for dinner again that night. But this time she didn't bring a bag. October slipped quietly into November, and the first frost traced the windows of the Mercer apartment like the beginning of a new kind of silence. Not the cold kind, the kind that held its breath before something brave. Grace moved differently now. She no longer checked the clock when she stayed late. She stopped bringing spare clothes in her tote bag. Some nights she didn't leave at all. She wasn't living there, not officially. But her presence had stopped being an event. It had become part of the rhythm. Ethan hadn't pushed. He hadn't named what was happening between them, not since the night he gave her the key. But there was an openness to him now, like something that had been locked away for too long had finally begun to stretch. One morning she caught him at the dining table with Leo before school, tying a shoelace with mild frustration, his tie still undone, his expression soft in that distracted way of someone trying their best. She just stood there, coat half buttoned, her coffee cooling in her hands, and thought, this is what staying looks like. Not grand, just real. Later that week, Grace returned from a grocery run to find Ethan in the kitchen attempting French toast. Flour dusted the counter, the stove was slightly scorched, and Leo was watching the disaster with a mixture of admiration and concern. Grace set the bags down and crossed her arms. Is this a cry for help? Ethan turned, flipping something vaguely golden onto a plate. It's called Saturday. We're doing it wrong. Leo grinned. He's trying to learn your recipe. By memory. I was close, Ethan said. You used coconut milk. It's what we had. She blinked. We don't have coconut milk. I ordered it. She tried not to laugh but failed. Why? I thought it might be healthier. She stepped closer, peering at the slightly burned toast. That's not how health works. He handed her a plate. Taste it and say that again. She did. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good either. But it was his. Leo's giggle echoed off the cabinets, and Grace leaned against the counter, chewing thoughtfully, watching Ethan try to salvage the rest of the batch. You've changed, she said quietly. He looked up. You're different with him now. I don't feel different. You are, and he feels it. Ethan looked toward the hallway, where Leo had disappeared with his plate. It scares me how easy it is to miss things. I look back and can't believe how many moments I skipped. You were surviving, she said, echoing his own words. He met her gaze. Now I want to live. They didn't talk about the future, not directly, but it hovered between them like a familiar ghost. One evening, after putting Leo to bed, they ended up on the couch, a blanket over their legs, the soft buzz of the city below barely reaching them. Grace leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. Do you miss anything from before? She asked. He thought for a long moment. I miss believing work could fix everything, that if I just achieved enough, earned enough, built enough, I'd feel whole. And now, I know better. He turned toward her, his hand brushing her hair behind her ear with a gentleness that still surprised her. I want fewer things now, he said, but I want them more deeply. She didn't respond with words, just curled closer, her fingers looping through his like they'd always belonged there. But even in the quiet, tension could find a way in. In mid-November, Grace's sister called. They hadn't spoken in months, maybe longer. She was in the city. She wanted to meet. There was something fragile in her voice, like someone trying to apologize without the language to do it. Grace didn't tell Ethan at first. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because it reminded her of everything she'd left behind to be here, all the pieces of her life that didn't fit neatly into this new shape. They met at a park bench, wind chapping their cheeks, the sun already falling behind the buildings. Her sister looked older, a little worn, but familiar in that way only family can be. "I didn't know how to reach you," she said. "You didn't try. I thought you didn't want to be found." Grace stared out at the trees, brown and brittle. "Maybe I didn't." And now? Grace thought of Leo's drawings taped to the fridge, Ethan's key in her coat pocket. The way the apartment lights felt like warmth instead of display. "I'm still figuring it out." Her sister hesitated. "You seem settled." "I'm not sure I believe in settled." "Then what is it?" She looked at her hands, bare and cold against the bench. Something worth not running from. Ethan found out about the visit 2 days later. Not because Grace told him, but because Leo overheard her on the phone, talking quietly, saying things like "not yet" and "this is mine, not yours." He didn't ask until they were alone. "You didn't tell me," he said, not angry, just hurt. "I wasn't ready. Do you not trust me with your life outside of us?" "It's not about trust, it's about self-preservation." He waited. "I've had to build walls too," she said, "different ones, and sometimes even you can't get through them right away." Ethan stepped forward, reaching for her hand. "Then I'll wait at the door." She blinked hard. "I don't want to be another reason you shut down," he said, "but I want to know the rest of you, not just the parts you give me." Grace exhaled. "I've lived most of my life knowing how to leave quietly. I don't know how to stay loudly." "Then let me stay loud for both of us." She laughed, watery and surprised. "You're getting good at this." "I've had the best teacher." He pulled her close. And for the first time, she leaned in without hesitation. Thanksgiving arrived like a held breath. Ethan had never hosted before. He didn't know what dishes to make or who to invite. Most of his relatives lived overseas or had long stopped expecting anything of him outside of a polite quarterly email. Grace stepped in without question. She made a list. She taught Leo how to peel potatoes. She let Ethan ruin one pie and redeem himself on the second. It was just the three of them that day. No guests, no distractions. Just warmth and clumsy laughter, and a table too big for a family still finding its shape. After dinner, Leo fell asleep under a blanket on the couch, pie crumbs on his shirt and a content smile on his face. Grace and Ethan stood at the window, the city lit up in cold silver. "This feels like a beginning," he said quietly. She didn't answer right away. "Then that's the scariest part." He looked at her. "Because it could end. Because I've never let anything begin like this before." Ethan nodded slowly. "Let's just keep showing up then, one day at a time." Grace turned toward him. "I'm not here because I need saving," she said. "I know. I'm here because I want to choose this." He smiled, "Then choose it again tomorrow." She took his hand. And they stood there, silent, steady, waiting for the world to catch up to the quiet miracle unfolding inside their home. Winter arrived without apology. Snow fell one early morning in December, painting the city in a hush that only happened after midnight. Grace watched it from the balcony, a blanket around her shoulders, bare feet tucked beneath her. Inside, the apartment was still, Ethan and Leo asleep in the rooms behind her, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. She hadn't meant to stay over that night. But she hadn't packed a bag in weeks. There was a toothbrush beside the sink, a sweater on the hallway chair, a scarf Leo had picked out at a holiday market, still tucked into her coat pocket. Everything she, once called temporary, now had fingerprints of permanence. And yet the question still lived quietly inside her. What if this all vanished? Not because of catastrophe, but because life had a way of rearranging what you thought was certain. A few days later, she sat with Leo on the floor, building a marble track that curved like a question mark. He'd grown taller. She noticed it in the way he stretched his arms, the way his jeans hit above his ankles now. "Are you coming with us to the cabin?" he asked, voice casual but with eyes that didn't blink. "What cabin?" "Dad said we're going for Christmas. He said it's quiet, with trees and a fireplace and no meetings." Grace hesitated. Did he ask if I wanted to go? Leo shrugged. I told him he should. She smiled. That's very forward of you. He leaned against her arm. It's not the same when you're not there. That evening, Ethan handed her a small envelope with the rental confirmation. "There's a room for you if you want it." She held the paper like it might burn her. "I don't know if I'm ready to be that official." He nodded, unreadable. "Okay." She expected him to say more, to push, to explain. But he didn't. He just let it sit, which in its own way was harder. 2 nights before they left, Grace wandered into Ethan's office. He was reading a file, but his expression was far away. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "So are you." She sat across from him. "Are we pretending not to notice what's shifting between us?" "I thought we weren't pretending at all." "I'm afraid of naming things," she admitted, "because if we name them, they might start counting down." He closed the file and set it aside. "And what if we name them and they start counting forward instead?" She didn't have a reply, but she stayed in that chair until his eyes closed, his head resting against the leather back, the silence between them no longer sharp. The cabin was smaller than she expected. Warm wood, soft lamplight, a fireplace that crackled with a kind of ease Grace hadn't felt in years. Ethan chopped wood in the mornings while Leo threw snowballs into the forest with absolute seriousness. Grace made cocoa. She read by the fire. She let herself exist without role or expectation. And slowly, the space around her began to feel like it was hers too. On Christmas Eve, they strung up lights that blinked unevenly and cooked a dinner that went slightly off plan when the oven overheated. Grace stood in the kitchen, laughing helplessly as smoke filled the cabin, Leo waving a dish towel in circles, Ethan trying to salvage what was left of the roasted vegetables. "Next year we're ordering pizza," Ethan declared, coughing. Leo cheered. Grace leaned against the counter, eyes soft. "We'll see about next year." Ethan looked at her, not hopefully, not pleadingly. "Just openly. Would you?" She paused. "Would I what?" "See about next year." She didn't answer with words. She reached out, took his hand, and squeezed. It was enough. After Leo was asleep, curled up in a tangle of fleece blankets and stuffed animals that he refused to travel without, Grace sat on the couch staring at the fire. Ethan joined her, 2 mugs in hand, one for her, one for him. "You haven't said much tonight," he said. She turned slightly. "I've been thinking." He waited. "I've spent most of my adult life in borrowed rooms," she said, "telling myself I was fine as long as I left before anyone noticed how long I stayed." "You weren't invisible here." "I know." She met his eyes. "You made room for me. You filled space I didn't know was empty," he said. Her voice shook slightly. "I don't have a plan." "Neither do I. I still get scared. I don't mind reminding you you're allowed to stay." She set her mug down, her hand reaching for his. "I'm not promising forever," she said. "I'm not asking. I just want to stay for now, and maybe keep choosing it." He leaned forward, forehead resting against hers. "That's everything I hoped for." A few days later, back in the city, the rhythm resumed. But now it carried new weight. Leo had begun introducing her to people as Grace, who's basically my grown-up. Ethan added her to the building's front desk list without comment. Her name was on a takeout receipt. Her scarf hung beside his coat. One night she returned home from a walk, wind stinging her cheeks, and found a note taped to the fridge. Forgot to grab eggs. Leo says you make the best ones. Teach me when you're ready. No signature. Just his handwriting. And she smiled, slipping the note into the drawer where she kept her spare keys. Later, as Leo tugged her hand toward the living room to help him build a new model plane, Ethan passed behind her and gently kissed the top of her shoulder without needing a reason. There was no declaration, no dramatic vow, just the quiet, unshakable knowing that she'd stayed without being asked. Because some homes aren't built in blueprints or contracts. Some are built in the hush between breakfast and bedtime, in a boy's quiet trust, and in the steady presence of someone who learned, finally, how to stay, without needing promises to make it real.